They found the sheriff's body at dawn, hung from his own gallows with a gold coin placed over each eye. The town thought it was murder. I knew it was a message, because 15 years ago, I helped him steal that gold from a dying prospector, and now someone's come back to collect. Some debts don't die. They just wait in the dark, counting the years until payment's due. What's the saying? Oh, well, howdy, stranger. Old Jack at your service, though the only service I've got is flapping my gums and telling. You're here to hear a story. So lean in. The sun hadn't fully risen when the bells started ringing. Not church bells. Those hadn't been used for Sunday service in over a decade. These were the alarm bells. The ones they only rang when death came riding into Copper Ridge on a pale horse, wearing a grin made of bone and shadow. I was already awake. Sleep had been a stranger to me for weeks now, ever since the dream started. Dreams of gold coins gleaming in firelight. Dreams of a man's face, weathered and broken, begging for water we never gave him. Dreams of Sheriff Tom Hawkins laughing as we rode away, our saddlebags heavy with stolen fortune. My name is Daniel Cross. 15 years ago, I was a different man, younger, hungrier, stupid enough to believe that gold could wash away the stains of poverty. Tom Hawkins had been my closest friend then, before friendship gave way to partnership, and partnership gave way to something darker. We'd been deputies together, sworn to uphold the law in this dying mining town. Instead, we'd broken it in ways that couldn't be mended. The morning air was cold as I pulled on my boots and stepped onto the wooden porch of my small cabin on the edge of town. The alarm bells continued their frantic rhythm, echoing off the canyon walls that surrounded Copper Ridge like the ribs of some ancient, sleeping beast. People were emerging from their homes now, faces tight with fear and curiosity, moving toward the town square like moths drawn to flame. I followed, my hand instinctively resting on the grip of my revolver. The weapon felt heavier than it used to, weighted down by years of guilt I couldn't shake. The dirt road crunched beneath my feet as I walked, passing the shuttered storefronts and weathered buildings that marked this town's slow descent into irrelevance. Copper Ridge had been born from gold fever and was dying from its absence. The mines had run dry years ago, leaving behind only ghosts and men too stubborn or too broken to leave. The crowd had gathered in the square, a tight knot of bodies pressed together like they could ward off death through proximity. I pushed through them, my height and the marshal's badge pinned to my vest, giving me passage. That badge felt like a brand now, burning against my chest with the weight of hypocrisy. And then I saw him. Sheriff Tom Hawkins hung from the gallows in the center of the square, his body swaying gently in the morning breeze. His face was purple and swollen, eyes bulging behind the 2 gold coins that had been carefully placed over them. The coins caught the first rays of sunlight, gleaming like accusatory eyes that could see straight through to the rot inside every man watching. The noose around his neck was tied with professional precision, not the work of an angry mob or a panic killer, but something deliberate, something planned. Below his dangling feet, carved into the wooden platform of the gallows, were 3 words that made my blood run cold. The debt comes. Jesus Christ, someone whispered beside me. It was Doc Morrison, the town's physician, his face pale as bone. Who would do this to Tom? I couldn't answer. My throat had closed up tight, my heart hammering against my ribs like it wanted to escape my chest before whatever was coming found it there. Because I knew, not who had done this, not yet, but why. The gold coins were the signature, the calling card of a ghost I tried to forget. 15 years ago, Tom and I had been riding patrol in the hills above Copper Ridge when we'd stumbled upon a prospector's camp. Old Marcus Thorne, a solitary figure who'd been panning these mountains for decades, always just one strike away from fortune. That day, his luck had finally turned. We found him lying near his tent, sick with fever, barely conscious. And beside him, his life's work. 3 leather bags filled with gold dust and nuggets, worth more money than either of us would see in 10 lifetimes of honest work. Tom had looked at me. I'd looked at him. And without a word, we'd made our choice. We'd taken the gold, every last ounce of it. We'd left Marcus Thorne with nothing but his fever and a canteen of water we knew wouldn't last. We told ourselves he was dying anyway, that the gold would be wasted on a dead man, that we deserved it more. We'd ridden back to Copper Ridge and buried our fortune in separate locations, agreeing to wait years before spending it, letting time cover our tracks the way desert sand covers bones. Marcus Thorne had died 3 days later, alone in those hills. The official report said exposure and fever. No one had questioned it. No one except Marcus's son, Jacob Thorne, who'd come to Copper Ridge asking questions, making accusations no one wanted to hear. Tom had run him out of town with threats and violence, and eventually, Jacob had vanished into the territories, never to be seen again. Until now. The gold coins on Tom's eyes weren't random. They were Marcus Thorne's coins, part of the fortune we'd stolen. Someone had kept them all these years, waiting, planning, and now they'd come to collect the debt we'd thought was buried with an old man's bones. Cut him down, I heard myself say, my voice sounding distant and hollow. Get him down from there. Doc Morrison nodded, calling for help. Several men moved forward with ladders and rope, working to bring Tom's body down with as much dignity as death allowed. I stood watching, unable to move, my mind racing through possibilities and fears. If they'd killed Tom, I was next. The only question was when. As they lowered the body, one of the gold coins slipped from Tom's eye and fell, bouncing twice on the wooden platform before rolling to a stop at my feet. I stared down at it, seeing my distorted reflection in its golden surface. A man hollowed out by guilt, standing in the shadow of a reckoning 15 years in the making. I bent down slowly and picked up the coin. It was still warm, as if it had been heated by some internal fire. On one side was the profile of Lady Liberty. On the other, someone had etched a crude skull. I turned it over in my fingers, feeling the weight of it. Not just the metal, but everything it represented. Marshal Cross, a voice said behind me. I turned to find Mary Hawkins, Tom's widow, her face streaked with tears, but her eyes hard as flint. My husband trusted you. You were his friend. Find who did this. I nodded, pocketing the coin. I will, Mrs. Hawkins. I promise. It was the first honest thing I'd said in 15 years, even if she didn't know it, because I would find Jacob Thorne, if that's who this was. Not to bring him to justice, but to face the justice I'd been running from all this time. As the crowd began to disperse, I caught sight of a figure standing at the edge of the square, half hidden in the shadow of the livery stable. A man in a dark coat and wide-brimmed hat, his face obscured. He stood perfectly still, watching me with an intensity one could feel even at this distance. And then, as I took a step toward him, he turned and vanished into the narrow alley between buildings, leaving only a question mark hanging in the dusty air. The hunt had begun, but I wasn't sure anymore if I was the hunter or the prey. I didn't wait for the undertaker to finish his work, while the rest of Copper Ridge stood in shock clusters, whispering theories and trading fears like currency. I slipped away from the square and followed the path the stranger had taken. The alley between the livery and the old assay office was narrow and choked with shadows, even as morning light began to flood the streets beyond. My boots made no sound on the packed earth as I moved, one hand on my revolver, every sense heightened. The alley emptied into a back lot where abandoned mining equipment sat rusting, broken sluices, collapsed carts, pickaxes with splintered handles. Beyond that, the desert opened up like a mouth waiting to swallow anything foolish enough to enter. I scanned the horizon, searching for movement, for any sign of the figure I'd seen. Nothing, just heat shimmer and silence. Looking for someone, Marshal? The voice came from behind me, smooth and cold as river stone. I spun, my gun halfway drawn, to find the stranger standing at the mouth of the alley I just walked through. How he'd gotten behind me without making a sound, I couldn't fathom. He was closer now, close enough for me to see his face beneath the hat's brim. He was younger than I had expected, maybe 30, with a lean, withered face that spoke of hard miles and harder choices. His eyes were the color of winter ice, pale blue and pitiless. A scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, white against sun-darkened skin. He wore no badge, but his gun belt was well worn, the holster position for a fast draw. "Who are you?" I asked, keeping my voice steady, my hand still hovering near my weapon. "You know who I am," he replied. "Or you know what I represent, at least. The past Marshal Cross. The debt that's come due. Jacob Thorne." He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "My father talked about you in his letters. Deputy Daniel Cross, the honest man who'd sworn to uphold justice in Copper Ridge. He trusted you. He believed that if anything happened to him out in those hills, you'd make sure his work wasn't wasted, that his strike would go to his family." The words hit me like physical blows. "Your father was sick. We found him. You found him dying and decided to help him along." Jacob cut me off, his voice sharp as broken glass. "You and Tom Hawkins. Don't insult me with lies, Marshal. I know what you did. I've known for 15 years. "Then why wait?" I asked, genuinely curious despite the fear coiling in my gut. "Why not come for us years ago?" Jacob stepped closer, and I noticed he hadn't drawn his weapon. He didn't need to. The threat was in his eyes, in the coiled tension of his body. "Because I wanted you to have something worth losing first. I wanted you to build lives, to feel secure, to believe you'd gotten away with it. Sheriff Hawkins had his wife, his position, his reputation. You have your marshal's badge, this town's trust. And now I'm going to take it all away, piece by piece, just like you took everything from my father. So this is revenge." "No," Jacob said quietly. "This is justice. There's a difference." I thought about Tom hanging from the gallows, about the gold coins on his eyes, about the 15 years of guilt that had carved itself into my bones like rot. Tom didn't deserve to die like that, whatever we did. My father didn't deserve to die alone in the dirt either, Jacob interrupted. "But he did, and you made sure of it." Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Somewhere in the distance, a crow cawed, harsh and mocking. I knew I should arrest him, take him in for Tom's murder, but my hand stayed frozen at my side, unable to draw, because he was right. Every word he'd spoken was true. "What do you want from me?" I finally asked. "I want you to confess," Jacob said. "I want you to tell this town what you really are. I want you to strip away the badge and the pretense and stand before these people as the thief and murderer you've always been." "And if I don't?" His smile widened, cold as a snake's. "Then I'll keep killing. Not you, not yet, but everyone you care about, everyone who trusts you, one by one. I'll hang them from those gallows with gold coins on their eyes, and each time, you'll know it's because of what you did. You'll watch this town devour itself with fear and suspicion, and you'll carry the weight of every death." My blood ran cold. "You're insane." "Maybe," Jacob agreed. 15 years of hunting will do that to a man. 15 years of watching you and Hawkins live free while my father's bones bleached in the sun. Insanity might be a mercy at this point. He turned to leave, his coat swirling around him like smoke. "You have 3 days, Marshal. 3 days to confess, or the killing continues. And this time, I think I'll start with Doc Morrison. He seems like a good man. It would be a shame to waste him on your sins." "Wait," I called out, but he was already gone, vanishing into the maze of buildings and shadows that made up Copper Ridge's back streets. I stood alone in the empty lot, the sun climbing higher now, baking the earth and everything on it beneath its merciless gaze. I thought about running, saddling my horse and riding out, leaving Copper Ridge to whatever fate Jacob Thorne had planned for it. But even as the thought formed, I knew I wouldn't, couldn't, because for all my sins, for all the lies I'd lived with, I wasn't a coward. Not anymore. I walked back to my office slowly, my mind working through possibilities. The town would expect me to hunt down Tom's killer. They'd want justice, swift and final. But how could I deliver justice when I was as guilty as the man they wanted hanged? Inside my office, the morning light streamed through the dusty window, illuminating the wanted posters on the wall, the locked cabinet where I kept the rifles, the desk where I'd sat for 10 years, pretending to be something I wasn't. I pulled out the gold coin from my pocket and set it on the desk, watching it gleam. 15 years ago, Tom and I had made a choice. We'd chosen gold over honor, money over morality, and now the bill had come due, written in blood and gold and the shadows of men we'd tried to forget. I had 3 days to decide what kind of man I truly was. 3 days to choose between the life I'd built on lies or the death that truth would bring. The coin sat on my desk, catching the light, looking almost alive, and in its gleaming surface, I could see the ghosts of all my sins staring back at me, waiting to see what I would do. The first day passed like a fever dream. I went through the motions, organizing search parties, interviewing witnesses, examining the gallows for evidence I knew wouldn't lead anywhere useful. The town was in uproar. Tom Hawkins had been Copper Ridge's sheriff for 12 years, and though he'd been hard and sometimes cruel, he kept order in a place teetering on the edge of chaos. Now that order was crumbling. By evening, fear had settled over Copper Ridge like a burial shroud. Families locked their doors early. The saloon sat empty, its piano silent. Even the prostitutes who worked the cribs behind the silver dollar stayed hidden, their windows dark. The town had become a graveyard with a heartbeat, waiting for the next blow to fall. I sat in my office as darkness gathered, the oil lamp on my desk throwing shadows that danced on the walls like demons at a midnight dance. The gold coin lay before me, and beside it, an old photograph I'd kept hidden in my desk drawer for 15 years. It showed Tom and me as young men, fresh-faced and eager, wearing our deputy badges with pride. We believed in something back then, or at least we'd told ourselves we did. The door opened without warning. I had my gun drawn before I registered who it was, Doc Morrison, his medical bag in hand, his face drawn with exhaustion. "Put that away, Daniel," he said wearily. "If I wanted you dead, I'd have poisoned you years ago at the town picnic." I holstered the weapon, but didn't relax. "You shouldn't be out this late, document. Not safe." "Nowhere's safe anymore," he replied, settling into the chair across from my desk. His eyes fell on the gold coin, and something flickered across his face. Recognition, maybe, or fear. "That's old Marcus Thorne's gold, isn't it?" The coins he always carried, said they were from his first strike in California. My heart hammered against my ribs. "How do you know about Thorne's coins?" "I was the one who pronounced him dead, remember?" Doc's voice was soft, but his eyes were hard. "Rode out to his camp when someone finally thought to check on him. Found him 3 days gone, dried out like jerky in that tent. No food, no water, and no gold. Everyone said he'd probably spent it in Silverton or Carson City before he got sick, but I knew better. Doc, I knew because Marcus showed me those coins a week before he died." Doc continued, cutting me off. "Came to my office with a fever, asking for medicine. Paid me with 2 of them. Said he had plenty more where those came from. Said he'd finally done it, struck it rich, and was going to bring his son out from Missouri to help him work the claim." The room felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in. Doc leaned forward, his face grave in the lamplight. "I've kept quiet for 15 years, Daniel. Told myself it wasn't my business. That maybe I was wrong about what happened. But seeing that coin on Tom's eyes this morning, seeing you standing there like a ghost..." He shook his head. "Whatever's coming, you brought it here. And now good people are going to pay for your sins." Before I could respond, a scream split the night, high-pitched, terrified, coming from somewhere near the church. Doc and I were on our feet instantly, racing out into the darkness. Others emerged from their homes, lanterns bobbing like fireflies as we ran toward the sound. We found her in the churchyard, Martha Chun, the minister's widow, standing over a fresh grave. But it wasn't what was in the grave that had made her scream. It was what was on it. A body lay sprawled across the burial mound, arms spread wide in mockery of crucifixion. Even in the dim lantern light, I recognized him, Billy Moss, one of the miners who'd stayed on after the mines closed, trying to pan enough gold from the creek to buy his way out of Copper Ridge. He was young, barely 20, with a wife and infant daughter, and covering each of his eyes were 2 gold coins, gleaming like accusatory stars in the night. "Oh God," someone whispered. "Not Billy. He never hurt anyone." But I knew better. Billy hadn't been the target. He'd been the message. Because Billy's cabin sat directly adjacent to Doc Morrison's house. Jacob Thorne was keeping his promise, moving his pieces across the board like a chess master playing a game that ended in checkmate no matter what I did. Doc pushed through the crowd, kneeling beside the body. His hands moved with professional efficiency, checking for pulse, examining the wounds. When he looked up at me, his face was ashen. "Strangled," he said quietly. "Same as Tom. But this was done slower, more deliberately. He suffered." The crowd's murmur grew louder, edged with panic and rage. I could feel their fear transforming into something more dangerous. The need for action, for vengeance, for someone to blame. "Marshal," a voice called out. It was John Peterson, who owned the general store. "You gotta do something. We got a killer in Copper Ridge, and he ain't stopping." "I'm doing everything I can," I said, but the words sounded hollow even to my own ears. "Everything." Peterson stepped forward, his face red with anger. "Tom's been dead 1 day, and already we got another body. What kind of marshal are you?" "The kind who brought this plague upon you," I thought, but didn't say. Instead, I raised my voice, trying to project authority I didn't feel. "Everyone back to your homes. Lock your doors. No one goes anywhere alone until we catch this man." "And how long will that take?" someone shouted. "How many more have to die?" I had no answer. The crowd dispersed slowly, reluctantly, casting suspicious looks back at me and at each other. In the space of a day, Copper Ridge had transformed from a dying town into a powder keg, and I could feel the fuse burning shorter with every passing hour. Doc helped me carry Billy's body to the undertaker's, working in grim silence. When we were done, he turned to me, his eyes full of questions I couldn't answer. "This stranger," he said finally, "the one people saw at the edge of the square this morning. You know who he is, don't you?" I wanted to lie. God, how I wanted to lie. But I was tired of the wait, tired of the pretense, tired of being the man I'd pretended to be for 15 years. So instead, I told him the truth. I told him everything. When I finished, Doc stood silent for a long moment, staring at the floor. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with disappointment. "You were deputies, sworn to protect and serve, and you murdered a dying man for his gold." "We didn't murder him," I said weakly. "We just didn't save him." "That's the same thing, Daniel, and you know it." He was right. Of course he was right. But admitting it out loud made it real in a way that 15 years of guilt never had. "What are you going to do?" I asked. Doc looked at me with something like pity. "What I should have done 15 years ago. Whatever it takes to save this town from the consequences of your choices." He walked out, leaving me alone with Billy's blood on my hands and the knowledge that I had 2 days left before Jacob Thorne's deadline. 2 days to confess or watch Copper Ridge burn. I returned to my office and sat in the darkness, the gold coin cold between my fingers. Somewhere out there, Jacob Thorne was watching, waiting, counting down the hours until justice, or vengeance, was finally served. And I knew, with the terrible certainty of the damned, that before this was over, more blood would be spilled. The only question remaining was whose. The second day dawned blood red, the sunrise painting the desert in shades of crimson and shadow. I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Billy Moss's young face, those coins gleaming on his eyes like payment for sins that weren't his. I saw Tom hanging from the gallows. I saw Marcus Thorne, dying alone in the hills while Tom and I rode away with our stolen fortune. By noon, the town was a cauldron of fear and suspicion. 3 more families had packed their belongings and left, their wagons disappearing into the desert like ships fleeing a storm. Those who remained moved in groups, armed and watchful, jumping at shadows. I was in my office when Mary Hawkins arrived, her face haggard but determined. She didn't knock, just walked in and stood before my desk like an avenging angel carved from sorrow and rage. "My husband is dead," she said without preamble. "Billy Moss is dead. Who's next, Marshal? My children? Me, Mrs. Hawkins." "Don't." She cut me off, her voice sharp as broken glass. Don't give me platitudes or empty promises. I want the truth, Daniel. Tom and you were partners for years before he became sheriff. If someone targeted him, if someone's hunting people in this town, you know why. So tell me, what did you do? The question hung in the air between us, heavy as a hanging rope. I looked at this woman who'd buried her husband yesterday, who trusted me to find his killer, who deserved so much better than the truth I was about to give her. Who stole gold, I said quietly. 15 years ago, Tom and I found Marcus Thorne dying in the hills. He'd struck it rich, had bags of gold dust and nuggets. We took it all and left him to die. His son, Jacob Thorne, has come back for revenge. The silence that followed was profound. Mary's face went through a series of transformations: shock, disbelief, understanding, and finally, a fury so pure it seemed to burn the very air between us. "You're telling me," she said, her voice trembling with rage, "that my husband died because of gold you stole 15 years ago? That Billy Moss, who never hurt anyone, died because you and Tom were thieves?" Yes. She moved faster than I expected, her hand cracking across my face with enough force to snap my head sideways. The sting was nothing compared to the pain in her eyes. "I hope you burn in hell, Daniel Cross," she whispered. "I hope every day for the rest of your miserable life is torture. Because that's what you've given me. That's what you've given Billy's wife and his baby daughter. Torture." She turned and left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. I sat in the silence that followed, my cheek burning, tasting blood where I'd bitten my tongue. She was right, about all of it. I stood, checking my revolver, and stepped out into the harsh afternoon sun. If I was going to hell, I might as well try to save a few souls on the way there. I found Jacob Thorne exactly where I expected him to be, standing in the cemetery, looking down at a freshly dug grave. Not Billy's grave, which lay on the other side of the church. This was an older plot, weathered and forgotten, with no marker save a simple wooden cross carved with initials, MT, Marcus Thorne. "You brought his body back," I said, approaching slowly, keeping my hands visible. Jacob didn't turn, didn't acknowledge me at first. He just stood there, a dark figure against the bright desert sky, a living shadow cast by the dead. "I carried him on my back for 2 days," Jacob said finally. "Down from those hills where you left him to rot. Buried him here because this was the closest thing to civilization for 50 miles. Carved that cross myself." He turned then, his ice blue eyes meeting mine. "And then I spent 15 years planning how to make you pay for it." "You've made your point," I said. "You've killed Tom. You've killed Billy. The town is terrified. You want me to confess? Fine, I'll do it. Today, I'll tell them everything. Just stop killing innocent people." Jacob studied me for a long moment, his scarred face unreadable. "You think that's enough? You think a confession wipes the slate clean?" "No," I admitted, "but it's a start. It's what you asked for." "What I asked for," Jacob said softly, "was justice. And justice isn't just words, Marshal. It's blood for blood, pain for pain. Your confession doesn't bring back my father. It doesn't give Billy Moss's life back. It's just noise. Then what do you want?" I demanded, frustration breaking through my carefully maintained calm. "You want me dead? Fine. Shoot me right here. But leave this town alone. These people didn't do anything to your father." "Neither did Billy Moss," Jacob replied. "But he died anyway because of you. Because you created this situation 15 years ago when you decided gold was worth more than the human life. Every death, every scream, every moment of terror in this town is your responsibility, not mine. I'm just the instrument of justice." "You're a murderer," I said flatly, "just like me." He smiled at that cold, terrible smile. "Finally, the truth. That's what I wanted to hear, Marshal. The admission that we're the same, you and I. Both of us willing to kill for what we believe in." "No," I said, "we're not the same. Because I'm stopping this. Right now." I drew my gun, aiming it square at Jacob's chest. At this range, even a mediocre shot couldn't miss. But Jacob didn't flinch, didn't move. He just stood there, looking at me with something that might have been pity. "You won't pull that trigger," he said confidently, "because if you kill me, you'll never know where I hid the rest of the gold coins. And trust me, Marshal, there are plenty more. Enough to mark every person in this town, if that's what it takes. You kill me, and those coins become a mystery, a curse that'll hang over Copper Ridge forever. Every death, every accident, people will wonder, was it Jacob's revenge from beyond the grave? Was there someone else helping him? This town will tear itself apart with paranoia." My hand trembled slightly. He was right, damn him. He was right about everything. "But," Jacob continued, "if you confess publicly, in front of the whole town, if you strip off that badge and face your judgment, then maybe, just maybe, I'll consider the debt paid. Maybe I'll ride out of here and take my vengeance with me. And if I don't believe you, then pull that trigger," Jacob said, spreading his arms wide. "Kill me. Add one more body to your count and see where it gets you. But we both know you won't, because despite everything, you're still trying to be the hero, still trying to save people. It's pathetic, really." I stood there, gun raised, finger on the trigger, staring at the man who'd upended my life and exposed me for what I truly was. And I realized he was right. I couldn't kill him. Not like this. Not in cold blood, no matter how much he deserved it. I lowered the gun. "Tomorrow," I said, "at noon, I'll call a town meeting and tell them everything. But swear to me, swear on your father's grave, that you'll leave Copper Ridge after that. Swear no one else dies." Jacob looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You have my word. Confess your sins, and I'll ride out. The debt will be settled." I turned and walked away, feeling his eyes on my back like a target. Tomorrow at noon, Daniel Cross the Marshal would die. Maybe the man underneath could finally start to live. Or maybe, more likely, I'd just be dead. Noon arrived like an execution. The sun hung directly overhead, casting short, harsh shadows that seemed to judge everything they touched. I'd sent word through town that morning. Everyone was to gather in the square for an important announcement regarding Sheriff Hawkins's murder. They came reluctantly, fear and curiosity warring on their faces, armed men standing at the edges of the crowd like sentries, expecting attack. I stood on the gallows platform where Tom had hung 2 days ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd be confessing my sins from the same place where the first payment of blood had been made. The noose still hung there, swaying slightly in the hot breeze, a reminder of what justice looked like in Copper Ridge. Doc Morrison stood in the front of the crowd, his face grave. Mary Hawkins was there too, surrounded by her children, her eyes red-rimmed but fierce. Billy Moss's widow, Sarah, held her infant daughter, barely able to stand. I saw shopkeepers and miners, prostitutes and pioneers, all the people who trusted me to protect them while I'd been living a lie. And at the very back, barely visible in the shadow of the saloon, stood Jacob Thorne, watching, waiting. I removed my marshal's badge slowly, feeling the weight of it in my palm one last time. 10 years I'd worn this star. 10 years of pretending I deserved it. "My name is Daniel Cross," I began, my voice carrying across the silent square. "For the past 10 years, I've been your marshal. Before that, I was a deputy under Sheriff Hawkins. You trusted me. You believed I stood for law and order in this town." I paused, looking out at their faces. "I lied to you. For 15 years, I've been lying to everyone, including myself." The crowd stirred, murmurs rising like disturbed wasps. 15 years ago," I continued, my voice steady despite the fear coiling in my gut, "Tom Hawkins and I were riding patrol in the hills above town. We found a prospector named Marcus Thorne dying in his camp. He'd just struck it rich. Bags of gold dust worth thousands of dollars. He was sick with fever, barely conscious, dying whether we helped him or not. I saw the understanding dawning on faces, saw the horror beginning to spread. We could have brought him to town. Doc Morrison might have saved him, but we didn't. We took his gold instead, every ounce of it, and we left him to die alone. We told ourselves he was already dead, that we weren't really murderers, but we were. We murdered Marcus Thorne as surely as if we'd put bullets in him. The silence was absolute now. Even the wind seemed to have stopped, as if the desert itself was holding its breath. Sheriff Hawkins kept his share of the gold. So did I. We built our lives on it. His position, my badge, everything we had came from that blood money. And we told ourselves we'd gotten away with it. I held up the gold coin, letting the sunlight catch it. But debts like that don't disappear. They wait. They grow. They come back with interest. Marcus Thorne had a son, Jacob Thorne. He's been hunting us for 15 years, and 2 days ago, he got his first payment when he killed Tom Hawkins. Yesterday, he killed Billy Moss as a warning to me, to show me that my failure to confess would cost innocent lives. The crowd erupted, shouts of rage, cries of disbelief, someone sobbing. Sarah Moss screamed, a sound of pure anguish that cut through everything else. "My Billy died because of you," she shrieked. "Because you're a thief." "Yes," I said, not trying to defend myself. "Billy died because of me, because of what I did 15 years ago, because I was a coward who chose gold over honor." "Where's he?" someone shouted. "Where is this Jacob Thorne?" I looked toward the back of the crowd, but Jacob was gone, vanished like smoke. My heart sank. Had he lied? Was he going to keep killing despite my confession? "I don't know," I admitted. "But I've confessed as he demanded. Maybe now he'll leave Copper Ridge in peace." "Peace?" John Peterson pushed to the front, his face purple with rage. "You think we can have peace after this? You think we can trust anything about this town when the marshal was a murderer all along?" "No," I said quietly. "I don't expect trust. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know the truth." "Truth?" Mary Hawkins stepped forward, her voice like ice. "The truth is that you killed my husband. Maybe not with your own hands, but you killed him just the same. You killed Billy. And for what? Gold you probably spent years ago." "I never spent it," I said. "It's buried 3 miles north of here, under a dead cottonwood tree. All of it. Every ounce. I couldn't bring myself to use it, knowing where it came from." Doc Morrison spoke up then, his voice carrying authority. "What do you want us to do, Daniel? You've confessed. You've admitted your guilt. But confession without consequence is just noise." He was right. I'd known this moment was coming since the day I'd taken that gold. I'd just been too much of a coward to face it until now. "I want you to give me to the law," I said. "Real law, not the sham I've been pretending to uphold. Send word to the territorial marshal. They'll come for me. Put me on trial. Hang me or send me to prison. Whatever the law says I deserve." "That'll take weeks," Peterson growled. "And what about Jacob Thorne? What about the man who actually killed Tom and Billy?" "If he keeps his word," I said, "he'll leave now. The debt's been paid with confession. If he doesn't..." I shrugged. "Then I guess we'll know he was just a murderer after all, not an avenging son." The crowd's mood was ugly, shifting toward mob violence. I could see it in their eyes. They wanted blood, wanted immediate justice, and I couldn't blame them. "String him up," someone shouted. "Right here, right now." He admitted it. Others took up the cry, pushing forward. Doc Morrison tried to calm them, but the rage had taken hold. I stood on the platform, the noose swaying behind me, and accepted what was coming. Maybe this was justice after all. Quick and final, like the justice I denied Marcus Thorne. But then a shot rang out, not aimed at me, but fired into the air. The crowd froze, turning toward the source of the sound. Jacob Thorne stood at the edge of the square, his revolver still smoking. He walked forward slowly, the crowd parting before him, like the Red Sea. "The marshal has confessed," Jacob said, his voice carrying clearly. "He's admitted his crime publicly, stripped himself of his badge and his honor. That was the agreement." "And what about the people you killed?" Sarah Moss screamed at him, tears streaming down her face. "What about my Billy?" Jacob's face softened slightly, the first real emotion I'd seen from him. "Your husband's death is on the marshal's conscience, not mine. I'm sorry for your loss, but the debt is paid now. Cross has given up everything. just like my father did. That's justice. That's not justice, Mary Hawkins said coldly. That's just revenge dressed up in pretty words. Maybe, Jacob agreed, but it's all I have. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw my own exhaustion mirrored in his eyes. 15 years of hunting had hollowed him out the same way 15 years of guilt had hollowed me. I'm leaving Copper Ridge, Jacob announced. The gold coins I placed on the dead were my father's, meant to mark the guilty. There are no more coins, no more revenge. It's over. He turned to go, but I called out to him. Wait. Jacob paused, looking back. Where's the rest of it? I asked. The rest of your father's gold. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Used it all hunting you. 15 years of bribes, supplies, information. It's gone. Every last ounce spent on justice. He tipped his hat mockingly. So in the end, Marshal, you didn't just rob my father. You robbed both of us. Then he was gone, disappearing into the maze of buildings, leaving behind a town that would never be the same. The crowd turned back to me, their anger not diminished, but somehow transformed. They didn't lynch me. Instead, they locked me in the town's small jail, the same jail Tom and I had used to hold drunks and petty thieves, and sent word to the territorial marshal. Through the barred window, I watched the sun set over Copper Ridge, painting the desert in shades of gold. Fitting, really. Gold had been my curse and my salvation, my sin and my judgment. Tomorrow, real justice would begin. But tonight, for the first time in 15 years, I slept peacefully. The weight of the lie was finally gone, replaced by the lighter burden of truth, even if that truth would likely get me hanged. 3 weeks passed. The territorial marshal arrived, a hard-faced man named Coleman who'd seen enough of frontier justice to recognize it in all its forms. He listened to my confession, took statements from the townspeople, and eventually placed me in chains for transport to the territorial capital where I'd stand trial. But something unexpected happened in those 3 weeks. Something I never could have predicted. Copper Ridge began to heal, with the truth exposed, with the secrets finally dragged into the light. The town's fear began to transform. People talked openly about what had happened, about the murder of Marcus Thorne and the revenge of his son. They argued and debated, mourned their dead, and gradually started to forgive. Not me, never me, but each other. The suspicion that had torn them apart began to fade. Doc Morrison visited me in jail 2 days before Marshal Coleman was set to take me away. He brought food, actual good food, not the slop the town had been feeding me, and sat across from me in the cell, looking older and sadder than I'd ever seen him. You know, he said quietly, in a strange way, you did Copper Ridge a service. I looked at him in disbelief. I brought a killer to town document. I got 2 men murdered. How is that a service? You gave us the truth, he replied. This town's been dying for years, not from lack of gold, but from lack of honesty. Everyone here was living a lie of some kind, pretending things were better than they were, hiding behind false pride and empty promises. You and Tom were just the biggest liars, but you weren't the only ones. He gestured toward the window, where we could see townspeople moving about their business. Jacob Thorne was right about one thing. Sometimes the only way to get justice is to burn everything down and start over. Your confession was the fire. It hurt like hell, but it cleaned out the rot. Billy Moss is still dead, I said quietly. Tom's still dead. No amount of cleansing changes that. No, Doc agreed, but Sarah Moss won't have to wonder why her husband died. Mary Hawkins knows the truth about her husband now, not just how he died, but who he really was. That's not comfort, exactly, but it's better than lies. I thought about that for a long moment. What'll happen to the town after I'm gone? Doc shrugged. Same thing that was always going to happen. It'll keep dying, probably disappear in another 10 years. But maybe it'll die honestly now. Maybe the people who leave will leave knowing the truth, and the people who stay will stay for the right reasons. He stood, preparing to leave. For what it's worth, Daniel, I don't think you're evil. I think you're human. You made a terrible choice when you were young, and you've been paying for it ever since. The hanging, if that's what they give you, that's just the final payment." After he left, I sat in the gathering darkness, thinking about debt and payment, about justice and revenge. I thought about Marcus Thorne dying alone in those hills, and about his son spending 15 years hunting me. I thought about Tom and Billy, about their families, about all the lives destroyed by one moment of greed. The gold I'd buried was dug up by Marshal Coleman. He'd return it to whatever authorities could determine Marcus Thorne's rightful heirs. Not that it mattered anymore. Gold was just metal, inert and meaningless. It was what people were willing to do for it that gave it power. On my last night in Copper Ridge, I had a visitor I didn't expect. Sarah Moss, Billy's widow, stood outside my cell, her baby daughter sleeping in her arms. She'd been crying. Her eyes were red and swollen, but her face was composed. "I don't forgive you," she said without preamble. "I'll never forgive you for what you took from me." "I don't expect you to," I replied honestly. "But," she continued, "I want you to know that Billy wouldn't have wanted this. He was a good man, a better man than most in this town. He believed people could change, could be better than their worst moments. So even though I hate you, even though I wish you died instead of him, I'm going to try to be the person he believed I could be. I'm going to let go of this anger before it poisons me the way your guilt poisoned you." She turned to leave, then paused. "Doc Morrison is organizing a collection for your legal defense. He says everyone deserves a fair trial, even murderers. I didn't contribute, but I didn't stop it either. That's the best I can do." After she left, I cried for the first time since the night we'd taken Marcus Thorne's gold. I cried for Billy and Tom, for Marcus and Jacob, for all the lives twisted by one moment of weakness. But mostly, I cried for the man I could have been if I'd made a different choice that day in the hills. Marshal Coleman came for me at dawn. The chains were heavy, but no heavier than the weight I'd been carrying for 15 years. As we rode out of Copper Ridge, I looked back one last time at the town I'd failed so completely. The gallows still stood in the square, its shadow long in the morning light, and standing beneath it, watching me go, was a figure in a dark coat and wide-brimmed hat. Jacob Thorne hadn't left after all. He'd stayed to see me taken away, to witness the final chapter of his revenge. Our eyes met across the distance. He didn't wave, didn't smile. He just stood there, a living monument to the cost of old sins. Then Marshal Coleman spurred his horse, and Copper Ridge disappeared behind us, swallowed by the desert and the past. I was tried 3 months later in a proper courtroom with a proper judge. Doc Morrison's defense fund paid for a lawyer who argued that I'd lived 15 years as a lawman, that I tried to make amends through service. The prosecution argued that I was a thief and a murderer who'd only confessed when caught. In the end, the jury found me guilty. The judge sentenced me to 20 years hard labor in the territorial prison. Not a hanging. Apparently my confession and cooperation counted for something. But 20 years might as well have been a death sentence for a man my age. I was 35 when I went into prison. I was 50 when I walked out, old and broken, with nothing to my name but the clothes on my back and a letter that had been waiting for me for 5 years. It was from Doc Morrison. Copper Ridge had finally died. He wrote, "The last families had left 3 years ago, abandoning the buildings to the desert in time. The town was a ghost now, home only to dust and memories. But there was one more thing. Jacob Thorne had died 2 years after my imprisonment consumption. The letter said, though Doc suspected it was more a case of a man who'd spent his entire purpose and had nothing left to live for. He'd left specific instructions that he'd be buried next to his father in Copper Ridge's cemetery. I used the last of my strength to make the journey back. It took me a month, traveling on foot and by wagon, eating charity and sleeping rough. But eventually, I stood once more in the square where this all began. The town was exactly as Doc described, empty and dying, buildings collapsing in on themselves, the gallows finally fallen. But the church still stood, and behind it, the cemetery remained. I found Marcus Thorne's grave easily enough. Someone, probably Jacob, had replaced the wooden cross with a proper stone marker. Marcus Thorne, 1825 to 1875. His gold brought only sorrow. And next to it, a matching stone. Jacob Thorne, 1852 to 1892. He sought justice, but found only revenge. I knelt between the two graves, my old bones creaking, and finally said the words I should have said 35 years ago. I'm sorry. I'm so damn sorry. The desert wind was my only answer, carrying dust and the whispers of the dead across a land that had witnessed too much death and not enough redemption. I dug one more grave that day, using a rusted shovel I found in the church. It took me all day and into the night, my body protesting every movement. But when the sun rose the next morning, there were 3 graves in that cemetery. I lay down in the 3rd grave and closed my eyes for the last time. The doctor in the nearest town, 50 miles away, would later rule at heart failure. But I knew better. Some debts can't be paid with gold or blood or even years of suffering. Some debts require everything you have, everything you are, given up completely. I paid my debt in the dust of Copper Ridge, beneath a desert sky that had seen it all and judged none of it. The gold that started everything was long gone, scattered and spent and meaningless. But the graves remained, 3 markers in a dead town, telling a story about greed and revenge, about justice and its terrible cost. In the end, the desert claimed us all. The prospector, the hunter, and the lawman claimed us and kept us, 3 souls bound together by gold and guilt, forever marked by choices made in a moment and paid for across a lifetime. The wind blew over Copper Ridge, carrying our story into the emptiness, where it dissolved like dust into dust. And the desert, patient and eternal, waited for the next fool to stumble through, carrying his own burden of gold and sin. See you around, my friend. I've got another story for you.